Throughout history, there have been many different execution methods that have been used to take the life of a condemned person. At times, even elephants were used in Asia to stomp a person to death, or there were brutal practices and methods such as gibbeting, in which someone was suspended in an iron cage until they literally rotted away. Different monarchs also utilised different methods. For example, Henry VIII would use boiling alive to punish a cook who was suspected of poisoning the food of a bishop, and Vlad the Impaler literally got his name from his chosen method of execution, which he would use upon his enemies. But one of the most common execution methods which was deployed by the military, and is still today during times of war, is firing squad. But is this one of the most brutal execution methods in history? Join us today as we look at this, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Execution by firing squad is considered a quick method in which firearms are used to take the life of a condemned person. The gunshot is usually aimed towards the heart or the brain, and it's believed to be a rather rapid death, but it has gone wrong a number of times throughout the years. A firing squad is usually made up of a number of soldiers. The specific number may vary on a number of factors, including which armed forces are doing the shooting, and also the availability of men to perform the job. Usually they are made of up to more than 6 men, and the men are all told to fire at the same time. This is to help relieve the burden of the shooters as to who fired the lethal shot that actually took the life of another person. To avoid disfiguring injuries, sometimes the official in charge of the squad would also ask for a paper target or cloth to be pinned to the jacket of the victim so the men could aim at the heart. Also, prisoners are sometimes blindfolded, as well as being tied to stakes or pieces of wood or metal that are found on the firing range. Those who refuse the blindfold are considered to be very brave, and generally firing squads for military men are considered a dignified end. The execution method, though, is rather dangerous, as usually it is carried out against an earthen bank or inside of a trench, as there is a danger of bullets ricocheting off and hitting people following the volley of shots being fired. The execution can sometimes be carried out at first light, and during the First World War, this gave credence to the idea of British soldiers being shot at dawn. These men, who were executed in this way, were convicted of a number of military offences, including cowardice and desertion. Their executions attracted a huge amount of criticism, especially due to the fact many of those shot at dawn were suffering from shell shock, which is now considered PTSD, and there was very little understanding of the condition. There were also a number of men who were incredibly young when they were executed, but the British Army used them as an example for other soldiers. Firing squads can also be ordered to shoot into the back of a victim. This was considered shameful, and following the fall of Mussolini in Italy during the Second World War, a number of his supporters were executed in this way. They were turned around after they had been secured to a chair, and the firing squad then fired into their backs. But there are occasions of a firing squad not being able to perform the job instantly, and if this happened, often the victim would be lying on the ground or bent over on the stake, often screaming in pain. This would of course be rather distressing for people to see, so usually the officer in control would then make his way over to the victim and then pull out a pistol and give them a coup de grace gunshot to the head, finishing them off. But it was not just with guns that firing squads were used. It has been going on for centuries, especially with advancements in warfare, and during the medieval times it was even used and before. Saint Sebastian is often shown to have been executed by a squad of Roman archers around AD 288, and this is also the fate that King Edward the Martyr suffered. He was tied to a tree and was then shot through by Viking archers who littered his body with arrows. But some military men were refused firing squads and were instead executed by hanging, as this was considered more shameful, especially for war criminals. Galeazzo Ciano, the son-in-law of Mussolini, was one of those who was shot in the back, which was considered shameful, but at the last minute, as the firing squad were told to ready, he quickly turned his chair around and faced the executioners, who shot into him. But as mentioned, often a blank cartridge is given to members of the firing squad. One or more soldiers are given rifles with this in, to make sure that they don't really believe that they were the ones who administered the brutal shot. This makes the responsibility of taking the life split between the members of the firing squad rather than just on one sole person. But when the execution is taking place, firing a live round creates a large amount of recoil, and using a blank does not, meaning that with a bolt-action rifle, often the men of the firing squads could work out who administered the fatal shot. One man during the First World War, Private W.A. Quinton, would state that he and his 11 colleagues were relieved of live ammunition from their rifles and were given replacement guns to do their job. After the speech by the officer in charge, the squad fired the volley of shots, and Quinton recounted that, "I had the satisfaction of knowing that as soon as I fired, the absence of any recoil showed that I had merely fired a blank cartridge." There have been many prominent people throughout history who have been executed in this way. During World War I, Edith Cavell, a British nurse, was shot at a firing range in Belgium for conveying troops to the enemy. It was of course used to murder millions during the Second World War, as the German death squads would follow the advancements of the army. They would shoot straight into hundreds of people in short amounts of time inside of pits that they forced them to dig. There was in Mexico the story of a man, Wenceslao Miguel, who during the Mexican Revolution actually survived the firing squad, and he was shot 10 times, and he somehow managed to live and survive. But he was left heavily disfigured by his horrific experience. During the First and Second World War, executions by a firing squad did take place in Britain, within the Tower of London, the same place where Anne Boleyn and Catherine Howard, two wives of King Henry VIII, lost their heads. This firing range was found in the rifle range, which was actually used for practice, but there were 2 others who were shot in the Tower's ditch, an earthen embankment. The final execution at the Tower was by firing squad, and this saw German spy Joseph Jacobs, who had parachuted into Britain, shot on the firing range. Inside of America, during the War of Independence, George Washington approved firing squad as an execution method. Throughout the Civil War, 433 of the 573 men who were executed were shot dead by a firing squad. Since 1960, it's been used 4 times as a method of execution, all in Utah. Today, Mississippi, Oklahoma, South Carolina, and Utah still use firing squad for the death penalty, and further states are debating bringing it back. But execution using firing squad is, as mentioned, strongly linked to the military, and it was considered a much more proud death rather than being sent to the gallows. Some war criminals would be allowed the firing squad instead due to their ranks in certain armies, but others would petition to be shot rather than be hanged. It was considered much quicker than other alternatives, as it could be instant, but if it went wrong, firing squad was a traumatic and brutal execution method. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.